A flashing red and blue light suddenly lit up the rearview mirror. For most people, it would have been nothing more than an annoying inconvenience, perhaps a simple speeding ticket. But for a black man driving through an affluent, heavily policed suburb, that light could instantly turn an ordinary night into a nightmare. On this rainy evening, an arrogant, deeply prejudiced patrol officer pulled over a quiet, well-dressed driver, convinced he had caught an easy target. He had no idea that the man now sitting in handcuffs was a federal judge, the one person who could dismantle his entire life with a single decision. The rain came down in cold, relentless sheets, turning the asphalt of Interstate 90 into a dark mirror of reflecting taillights. Inside his meticulously maintained Lexus LS, the Honorable Reginald T. Forsyth let out a long, heavy sigh. Having spent decades navigating the intricate corridors of the American justice system, he now served as a federal judge for the United States District Court. He was known for his sharp legal mind, his quiet dignity, and a patience forged through countless grueling trials. The day had been exhausting. He had spent long hours presiding over a complex corporate case, wading through mountains of financial documents. All he wanted was to get home, pour a glass of bourbon, and lose himself in a book that did not require a law degree to understand. But a massive pileup on the interstate had forced a detour, routing him through Oakmont Hills, an ultra-wealthy, predominantly white enclave just outside the city. It was the kind of town where property taxes were sky-high, lawns were trimmed with surgical precision, and the police department had a reputation for aggressively guarding its borders. Reginald adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and kept his speed steady at a careful pace, well within the limit. He knew the unwritten rules. A black man in a luxury car driving through a place like Oakmont Hills after dark was a magnet for trouble. His Harvard law degree, his power to authorize wiretaps or send people to prison, none of it mattered in the dark behind the wheel. He was just a profile. A mile down the elm-lined avenue, an Oakmont Hills police cruiser sat idling in the shadows. Inside sat Officer Shane Whitaker, 30-something, with a high and tight haircut and an ego far larger than his badge. Whitaker had built his career on minor drug busts and aggressive traffic stops. He saw himself as the gatekeeper of Oakmont Hills, protecting its pristine streets from anyone he considered an outsider. He liked to brag that he had a sixth sense for spotting people who did not belong. As Reginald's Lexus glided past, Whitaker's eyes narrowed. The car was too clean. The windows had a slight factory tint, just enough for him to make out the silhouette of an older black man at the wheel. In Whitaker's prejudiced mind, a high-end luxury car driven by someone who did not belong in Oakmont Hills late at night could only mean one thing: trouble. He pulled out and fell in behind the Lexus. Reginald saw the headlights appear in his mirror and felt a cold, familiar knot form in his stomach, a sensation he had not felt in years. He checked his speed, still well within the limit. He signaled early and made a slow, deliberate turn onto a winding residential street. Whitaker followed. "Let's see what you do," Whitaker muttered, fingers drumming on the wheel. He watched for any tiny mistake, a tire touching the line, a turn without a perfect signal, a rolling stop. But Reginald drove flawlessly. Frustrated, Whitaker decided he did not need a real reason. He just needed a pretext. He radioed dispatch, claiming a suspicious vehicle with possible window tint and lane violations. Then he reached up and flipped the switch. The night exploded in blinding red and blue. Reginald pulled over immediately, easing the heavy car safely onto the shoulder beneath a flickering street lamp. He shifted into park, turned off the engine, and rolled down his window. Following a lifetime of hard-learned survival instincts, he placed both hands flat on the top of the steering wheel and waited. The rain drummed heavily against the roof. In his side mirror, he watched Officer Whitaker step out of the cruiser. The officer took his time, adjusting his duty belt, shining a high-powered flashlight directly into Reginald's mirror to blind him before beginning the slow walk toward the driver's side door. As he approached, Whitaker unclipped the retention strap on his holster, an obvious intimidation tactic. "Evening," Whitaker said, his voice flat and dripping with unearned authority. He kept the flashlight beam aimed straight into Reginald's eyes. "Good evening, officer," Reginald replied. His voice was a rich, deep baritone, calm, steady, and completely devoid of the nervous flutter most people showed during a traffic stop. He had stared down cartel leaders and corrupt politicians in his courtroom. A local patrolman's posturing felt almost amateur by comparison. Whitaker leaned closer, sweeping his light across the immaculate interior. "Do you know why I pulled you over tonight?" "I confess I do not," Reginald answered smoothly. "I was driving under the speed limit, my registration is current, and my vehicle is in perfect working order. Perhaps you could enlighten me." Whitaker's jaw tightened. He did not like the way this man spoke, the vocabulary, the lack of fear, the quiet dignity. To him, dignity felt like defiance. "You swerved back there," Whitaker lied without hesitation. Failure to maintain your lane, plus your window tint looks illegal. Where you headed tonight, buddy? The word buddy hung in the air like a deliberate slight. I am heading home, officer, Reginald replied, choosing not to argue the fabricated violations yet. The interstate was backed up due to a collision, and my navigation routed me through here. I am simply passing through. Whitaker shone his light into the back seat, searching for anything suspicious. There was only a leather briefcase on the passenger seat. Whose car is this? It is my vehicle, officer. You got a license and registration? I do. My license is in my wallet, in my left interior jacket pocket. My registration is in the glove compartment. With your permission, I will reach for them now. Whitaker paused. Thrown by the hyper-compliant, procedural way Reginald spoke, it only made him angrier. Just get the license. Keep your hands where I can see them. Reginald slowly retrieved his wallet and handed over his driver's license. Whitaker snatched it and shone his light on the name. Reginald Forsyth, you live in the city, long way from home. As I explained, I was rerouted. Yeah, I heard your story, Whitaker sneered. What do you do for work, Reggie? Reginald's eyes narrowed slightly at the casual disrespect, but he answered carefully. I work in the legal profession. Whitaker scoffed. What, you a paralegal, a clerk? I am employed by the federal government. Whitaker laughed. Right, listen to me carefully. We've had a rash of burglaries in this neighborhood. High-end stuff. Guys coming in from the city in fancy cars they probably can't afford, casing houses. You fit the description. Reginald stared at him. Officer, I am in my early 60s. I am wearing a custom-tailored suit. Does it appear to you that I am casing homes in a rainstorm? Don't get smart with me, boy, Whitaker snapped. The thinly veiled slur struck like a physical blow. Reginald's expression went cold. The quiet warmth vanished, replaced by the terrifying stillness that usually preceded his most devastating courtroom rulings. I highly suggest you reconsider your tone, officer, he said, his voice dropping an octave, radiating absolute authority. And I suggest you run my license, issue a citation if you truly believe I committed an infraction, and allow me to go on my way. You have no reasonable suspicion to detain me any further. Whitaker stepped back, shocked by the command in that voice, but shock quickly turned to fury. No one in Oakmont Hills spoke to him like that, especially not a black man pulled over at night. Step out of the car, he ordered, hand dropping to his weapon. On what legal grounds? Reginald asked calmly, hands still on the wheel. Whitaker unholstered his taser, the red laser dot landing squarely on Reginald's chest. I said step out of the damn car now, or I will drag you out and charge you with resisting arrest. Reginald looked at the red dot on his suit, then at the trembling anger in the officer's eyes. He knew exactly how this could end if he did not comply. He had presided over the civil suits. He had seen the dash cam footage of men who looked like him dying on wet asphalt over bruised egos. I am complying, he said softly. I am turning off the ignition. I am unbuckling my seatbelt. I am opening the door. He stepped out into the freezing rain. The cold water instantly soaked through his wool suit. He stood at his full height and looked down at Whitaker. Turn around, Whitaker barked. Put your hands on the roof. Spread your legs. Reginald turned slowly, placing his palms flat against the slick roof of his car. Whitaker moved in and kicked his ankles farther apart with unnecessary force, nearly causing him to slip on the wet pavement. He began a rough, aggressive pat-down, dragging his hands over Reginald's legs, waist, and chest. He pulled out keys, a fountain pen, and a folded handkerchief, tossing them carelessly onto the wet hood of the cruiser. Where are the drugs? Whitaker hissed near his ear. There are no drugs, Reginald replied, his voice low and steady over the storm. There are no weapons. There is no stolen property. You are conducting an illegal search under the Fourth Amendment. I don't need your consent. Whitaker sneered and yanked Reginald's arms violently behind his back. The sudden movement tore at his shoulder, sending a bolt of pain through his body. Reginald winced but made no sound. I'm taking you in, Whitaker said, breath hot and sour. You want to act like a lawyer, you can do it from a holding cell. You're under arrest. For what crime? Resisting a lawful order, obstructing an investigation. I'll think of a few more on the drive. Whitaker laughed and unclipped his steel handcuffs. The cold metal bit into Reginald's wrists as he ratcheted them down painfully tight. He grabbed Reginald by the collar and marched him toward the cruiser. When Reginald stopped and turned to face him, even with his hands bound, the look in his eyes was so piercing and devoid of fear that Whitaker involuntarily paused. Officer Whitaker, Reginald said softly, his voice cutting through the rain with terrifying clarity. I want you to remember everything you are doing right now. I want you to remember the threats you just made. I want you to remember the fabricated charges, because I assure you, by the time the sun rises, your life as you know it will be entirely over. Whitaker shoved him hard against the cruiser. Is that a threat? You're threatening a police officer. Add that to the list, buddy. Get in the car. He opened the rear door and forcefully pushed Reginald inside. Because Reginald was tall, his head struck the doorframe hard. He collapsed onto the hard plastic seat, his bound arms twisted painfully beneath him. The door slammed shut with a metallic thud. In the dark, claustrophobic rear of the squad car, Reginald struggled to sit upright. His wrists were bleeding, his tailored suit was ruined. His head throbbed. Through the plexiglass, he watched Whitaker walk back to the Lexus, grab the leather briefcase, and toss it carelessly into the front of the cruiser before slamming the door. He did not even secure the Lexus. He simply left it on the side of the road with the flashers on. Whitaker got behind the wheel, dripping wet, and looked at Reginald in the rearview mirror with a smug, victorious grin. "You're done, old man," he said. "Next stop, county lockup." Reginald leaned his head back against the plastic seat and closed his eyes. The rage inside him was a quiet, controlled inferno. He was not just a man who knew the law, he was a man who commanded it. He had dedicated his life to ensuring that the power of the state was wielded fairly. Now he sat in the back of a police car, a victim of the exact systemic rot he fought against every day. He said nothing. He did not scream. He did not beg. He did not reveal his identity. He simply sat in the darkness, letting the rhythmic sweep of the windshield wipers count down the final minutes of Officer Shane Whitaker's career. Whitaker had no idea what he had just done. He had not merely arrested an innocent man. He had arrested a sitting federal judge of the United States District Court. And Reginald was going to let him dig his own grave all the way to the bottom. Late into the night, the Oakmont Hills Police Department was quiet. When Officer Whitaker hauled Reginald through the heavy double doors, the squeak of his wet boots broke the silence. Reginald walked with his head held high, posture straight despite his soaking wet, ruined suit and the steel cuffs cutting off circulation to his hands. Behind the booking desk sat Sergeant Everett Lang, a heavy-set veteran, just a couple of years from retirement. He had seen every type of person walk through those doors, but something about the man Whitaker was shoving forward made his instincts flare. This man did not look like a burglar or a vagrant. He looked like someone important who had been caught in a storm. "What do we have, Whitaker?" Lang grunted. "Got a live one tonight, Sarge," Whitaker boasted loudly. He shoved Reginald roughly against the counter. "Caught him prowling through the Maple Drive sector, refused a lawful order, resisted arrest, obstructed my investigation. Probably casing the neighborhood. I want him in holding while I write up the felonies." Lang looked at Reginald. He noticed the blood trickling down his wrist and the unnervingly calm gaze. "Name?" "Reginald Forsyth," Reginald replied, his voice a calm, deep resonance that seemed entirely out of place in a booking room. Lang paused. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but he could not place it. "Turn around. Let's get those cuffs off for the search." Whitaker grinned. "Don't let him fool you, Sarge. He's a talker. Thinks he's a lawyer or something." Lang unlocked the cuffs. Reginald brought his hands forward slowly, wincing as blood rushed back into his bruised wrists. He did not rub them. He simply placed his hands flat on the counter and turned his penetrating gaze to the sergeant. "Sergeant," he said smoothly, "I am officially requesting that you preserve all dash cam and body cam footage from Officer Whitaker's vehicle in person. Furthermore, I am notifying you that I am being held without probable cause, and I request my phone to contact legal counsel." Whitaker laughed. "Listen to this guy. Thinks he's on television. Dump your pockets." Reginald ignored him completely, keeping his eyes locked on Lang. The sergeant frowned. The precision of the man's language was unsettling. Suspects usually screamed or cursed. They did not issue legal preservation directives. Whitaker, annoyed by the stoicism, grabbed the wet leather briefcase and slammed it onto the counter along with the wallet and keys. "Here's his property. I'm going to go get some dry clothes and start the paperwork. Put him in cell 2. Don't let him make a call until I say so." "You know that's not how it works, Shane," Lang sighed. "He gets a call after booking." Whitaker shot back and swaggered down the hallway toward the locker room, entirely confident he was in control. Left alone with Reginald, Lang pulled on blue latex gloves to begin the property inventory. "All right, Mr. Forsyth. Any weapons, needles, or contraband in this bag?" "None," Reginald said quietly. "Though I strongly advise you to pay close attention to the contents of that wallet and briefcase, Sergeant." Lang gave him a weary look and opened the soaked wallet. He pulled out the driver's license, $300 bills, a platinum credit card, and a health insurance card. Standard items. Then his fingers brushed against something heavy in the back compartment, a trifold credential case. He flipped it open. Under the overhead light, a solid gold shield gleamed. Beneath it, sealed in government laminate, was an identification card bearing the seal of the United States Department of Justice. The text was bold and undeniable. United States District Court, the Honorable Reginald T. Forsyth, Article 3, Judge. Lang stopped breathing. The air in the booking room seemed to vanish. His eyes darted from the golden seal to the ID photo, then slowly up to the towering, quiet black man standing across the counter. "Oh, sweet Jesus," he whispered, face draining of color. Reginald did not blink. "If you open the briefcase, Sergeant, you will find the sentencing guidelines for a multi-million-dollar federal embezzlement case I am presiding over tomorrow morning, documents that Officer Whitaker has now unlawfully seized." Lang's hands shook so violently he dropped the credential case. He had been a cop for 30 years. He knew the hierarchy. A patrol officer sat at the bottom. A federal judge was untouchable. A sitting Article 3 judge, appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate, possessed power that could wipe an entire police department off the map with one injunction. Your Honor, Lang stammered, voice cracking. He practically ripped off the latex gloves. Your Honor, I had no idea. I am aware, Sergeant Lang, Reginald said softly. You did not pull me over. You did not assault me. You did not fabricate charges against me. I'm releasing you right now, Lang said frantically, reaching for the keys. I'll get your car brought here. I'll personally drive you home. We can clear this all up. It's a massive misunderstanding, sir. Do not touch those keys, Reginald commanded. The volume barely rose, but the absolute authority behind it froze Lang in place. Sir, I have been formally placed under arrest by an officer of your department, Reginald stated, eyes burning with cold, righteous fury. I have been subjected to an illegal search, an unconstitutional seizure, and physical assault. I have been threatened with fabricated felony charges to intimidate me. If I were any other black man from the city, I would currently be locked in that cell, facing a ruined life because of the perjury of an arrogant man with a badge. I am not leaving. Judge Forsyth, please. If you are going to call your chief, Reginald interrupted, tone leaving no room for debate, you will wake him up, you will tell him to come down here immediately, and you will not tell Officer Whitaker a single thing until the chief arrives. Am I understood, Sergeant? Lang looked at the federal credentials and then at the bleeding wrists of the most powerful man he had ever met. Yes, Your Honor. Right away, Your Honor. Chief Preston Hale was deeply asleep in his sprawling suburban home when his cell phone vibrated violently on the nightstand. At 52, he was a political survivor who had carefully managed the wealthy residents of Oakmont Hills, keeping crime statistics low and his department well-funded. He fumbled for the phone. Chief, it's Sergeant Lang. You need to get down to the precinct right now. Hale sat up, rubbing his eyes. Lang was not the type to panic. Tommy, it's late. What's going on? We have a homicide. Worse. Lang's voice was a ragged, terrified whisper. Whitaker brought a guy in on a traffic stop, charged him with resisting obstruction, the whole thing. And? Chief, Lang said, pausing as if the words burned his throat. The suspect is Reginald Forsyth. Hale froze. The name hit him like a physical blow. He had spent years as an investigator before becoming chief. He knew every major player in the regional justice system. Reginald Forsyth was legendary. The judge who had fearlessly dismantled organized crime figures. The judge who had held federal agents in contempt for lying on warrants. He was brilliant, ruthless in his application of the law, and absolutely terrifying when crossed. Tommy, Hale breathed, blood roaring in his ears. Please tell me you are joking. Please tell me you have a different Reginald Forsyth. Black man, early 60s, custom suit. I'm staring at his gold DOJ shield right now, Chief. Whitaker handcuffed him, threw him in the back of the cruiser. He's bleeding, Chief. His wrists are bleeding. Hale dropped the phone. A wave of profound nausea washed over him. He scrambled out of bed, threw a heavy coat over his pajama shirt, shoved his bare feet into loafers, and sprinted for his SUV. As he tore out of his driveway, breaking every speed limit, his mind raced through the catastrophic fallout. False arrest, assault under color of law, civil rights violations, a Section 1983 federal lawsuit. The Department of Justice would descend like locusts. The media would feast. His career was over. The city would be bankrupted. Meanwhile, back at the precinct, Officer Whitaker was in the break room pouring himself fresh coffee. He had changed into a dry uniform and felt incredibly pleased with himself. A young rookie, Officer Reed, was heating up leftovers. Rough night out there, Shane? Reed asked. Nothing I can't handle. Whitaker smirked. Just had to put some city trash in his place. Guy was driving a $90,000 Lexus through my sector, giving me lip. Thinks because he wears a suit he can talk down to me. What did you hit him with? Failure to maintain lane to get him stopped. Whitaker laughed, openly admitting the pretextual stop. Then he refused to step out, so I yanked him out, tagged him with resisting arrest, obstruction. I'm going to talk to the DA tomorrow, see if we can tack on a felony intimidation charge. I want to see this guy sweat in county lockup for the weekend. Damn, Reed chuckled nervously. You don't mess around. Damn right I don't, Whitaker said, puffing out his chest. This is our town. You got to let these people know they can't just wander in here and act like they own the place. He tossed his empty sugar packet into the trash and walked out, heading toward the booking desk to collect his paperwork. He expected to see his suspect locked safely in a cell, humiliated and defeated. Instead, he walked into chaos. The heavy glass doors of the precinct flew open, and Chief Preston Hale stormed in, coat flapping open over his plaid pajama shirt, face an apoplectic shade of crimson. He was breathing heavily, eyes darting until they locked onto the booking desk. Judge Reginald Forsyth was sitting calmly on a wooden bench, sipping a cup of water Sergeant Lang had provided. He looked up as the chief entered, his expression completely unreadable. Hale ignored his own officers entirely. He practically threw himself across the room, stopping a few feet from Reginald. The chief of police, a man who commanded absolute obedience in this town, removed his hat and bowed his head slightly. "Judge Forsyth," Hale said, voice trembling with a mixture of terror and deep, groveling respect. "Your Honor, I cannot begin to apologize. I am profoundly, deeply sorry. This is a catastrophic failure of my department." Whitaker, who had just stepped into the hallway, froze. The coffee cup slipped from his fingers, shattering on the polished granite floor. "Judge, Your Honor." The words echoed in his brain, refusing to compute. He stared at the older black man he had threatened with prison time. He remembered the calm demeanor. He remembered the warning. "By the time the sun rises tomorrow, your life as you know it will be entirely over." "Chief," Whitaker squeaked, voice cracking like a terrified adolescent. "Chief, what's going on? Who is this guy?" Hale turned slowly. The look of groveling apology vanished, replaced by murderous, unadulterated hatred directed squarely at Shane Whitaker. "Shut your mouth, Whitaker," Hale roared. "Do not say another word. Stand against that wall and do not move a single muscle." He turned back to Reginald, visibly sweating. "Your Honor, I will personally drive you home. We will drop all charges immediately. There will be no record of this, and I assure you, Officer Whitaker will be severely disciplined. He will be suspended without pay pending an internal review." Reginald placed his plastic water cup gently on the bench. He stood up slowly, towering over the chief of police. He looked at Hale, then past him, locking eyes with a pale, shivering Officer Whitaker. "Chief Hale," Reginald said, voice echoing in the dead silence. "I do not want an apology. I do not want a quiet ride home, and I certainly do not want an internal review conducted behind closed doors." Hale swallowed hard. "What do you want, Your Honor?" "Officer Whitaker arrested me under color of law, depriving me of my constitutional rights," Reginald stated, stepping forward. "He fabricated evidence, committed perjury in his initial verbal report, and physically assaulted me. Therefore, I am not leaving this precinct. Instead, I suggest you call the local field office. I want Special Agent in Charge Victor Langford of the FBI down here immediately to open a federal civil rights investigation. And until he arrives, I want Officer Whitaker's badge and service weapon placed on this desk." Reginald's eyes drifted back to Whitaker, cold and unrelenting. "Because Officer Whitaker is no longer a police officer, he is a federal suspect." The silence in the precinct was deafening, heavy and suffocating, like the calm eye of a hurricane. Chief Hale stood frozen, color completely drained from his face. He looked at Reginald Forsyth, standing tall and resolute, then turned his gaze to Officer Shane Whitaker. Whitaker was trembling. The bravado that had fueled his entire adult life, the badge, the gun, the power to ruin lives on a whim, was vaporizing before his eyes. "Chief," Whitaker pleaded, voice a pathetic reedy whine. "You can't be serious. He was swerving. He refused a lawful order. You're going to take the word of a suspect over your own officer?" "Shut your damn mouth, Shane," Hale hissed, stepping toward the younger officer. Self-preservation had completely overridden any loyalty. He knew that if he did not comply with Reginald's exact demands, he would be indicted right alongside Whitaker for conspiracy to cover up a federal crime. "Hand over your weapon. Unclip the duty belt. Now." "Chief, please." "Do it," Hale roared. Shaking uncontrollably, Whitaker fumbled with the thick plastic buckle of his duty belt. His fingers lacked their usual dexterity. Finally, the buckle gave way, and the heavy belt, carrying his Glock taser cuffs and radio, slid from his waist and hit the floor with a loud metallic clatter. He unpinned his silver badge from his chest, hand hovering for a moment before he dropped it onto the booking desk right next to Reginald's gold Department of Justice shield. "Go sit in the interrogation room," Hale ordered, pointing a trembling finger down the hall. "Do not touch your phone. Do not speak to anyone." As Whitaker shuffled away, a hollow shell of the tyrant he had been an hour earlier, Hale turned back to Reginald. "Your Honor, I will make the call to the field office immediately." For the next hour and a half, the Oakmont Hills Police Department felt like a morgue. Reginald sat patiently on the wooden bench, finally accepting a clean, dry towel from a terrified Officer Reed to drape over his soaking shoulders. He did not pace. He did not speak. He simply waited, his presence acting as an oppressive weight on every cop in the building. In the early morning hours, the glass doors of the precinct slid open, and the atmosphere in the room violently shifted. 4 men in dark suits walked in, led by Special Agent in Charge Victor Langford. Langford was a towering, broad-shouldered man with close-cropped silver hair and the grim, unyielding demeanor of someone who had spent decades dismantling organized crime and corrupt officials. Following closely behind him were 3 armed federal agents wearing tactical vests emblazoned with bright yellow FBI letters. Langford bypassed the booking desk entirely, eyes locking onto Reginald. A look of deep, genuine concern crossed the veteran agent's face. He had worked with Judge Forsyth for years, securing warrants and testifying in his courtroom. "Reginald," Langford said, extending a hand, "are you all right?" "I am bruised, Agent Langford, but I am unharmed," Reginald replied, shaking the man's hand firmly. "Thank you for coming so quickly." Langford's eyes dropped to Reginald's wrists. The deep purple contusions and dried blood where the handcuffs had bitten into the skin were impossible to miss. His jaw tightened into a hard, unforgiving line. He turned slowly to face Chief Hale. "Chief Hale," Langford said, voice deceptively quiet, "I am officially taking jurisdiction of this precinct. My agents will be locking down your server room to preserve all digital evidence, including dispatch logs, body cam footage, and dash cam video. Where is the officer responsible for this?" "Interrogation room A, Agent Langford," Hale swallowed hard. "Before we speak to him," Reginald interjected smoothly, "I believe it would be prudent to review the audio-visual evidence of the traffic stop. Officer Whitaker was quite confident that I was swerving, resisting arrest, and casing the neighborhood. Let us see what the cameras captured." Hale gestured weakly to Sergeant Lang. "Tommy, pull up Unit 4's dash cam and body cam on the main monitor." Lang quickly typed on his keyboard, bringing up the precinct's main server display on the large wall-mounted television. "I have the dash cam, Chief, but—" He hesitated, clicking frantically. "Whitaker's body cam. The file is empty. It looks like he manually powered it down right before he exited the cruiser." A collective gasp swept through the room. Whitaker had purposefully killed his microphone and chest camera so there would be no audio of his racial slurs and fabricated threats. It was a classic dirty cop maneuver. "He turned it off," Hale whispered, burying his face in his hands. He knew how this looked to the FBI. It looked like an institutional cover-up. But Special Agent Langford simply smiled, a cold, predatory smile. "Chief Hale," he said, pulling an encrypted tablet from his briefcase, "are you aware of the Department of Justice grant your city accepted last year to upgrade your vehicle fleets?" Hale looked up, confused. "Yes, we installed the new systems." "Exactly," Langford nodded, tapping rapidly on his tablet. "And as part of that federal grant, those systems came with an automatic tamper-proof redundancy protocol." The moment Officer Whitaker activated his overhead light bar, the dual microphone array inside the cruiser began recording. It syncs with the officer's lapel mic via Bluetooth. Even if he powers down his primary chest camera, the cruiser system continues recording raw audio, uploading it directly to an encrypted cloud server that your local IT department cannot access or delete. Langford looked at Reginald. "With your permission, Your Honor." "Proceed," Reginald said. Langford connected his tablet to the wall monitor. The screen flickered, showing the high-definition wide-angle view from Whitaker's dashboard. The rain was lashing against the windshield. The black Lexus was pulled over perfectly on the shoulder. Then the audio kicked in, crystal clear. The entire precinct stood in dead silence as the true events of the night echoed through the room. They heard Reginald's calm, perfectly polite, legally sound responses. They heard Whitaker's vile escalation. "Don't get smart with me, boy." The racial slur hung in the air like toxic smoke. Chief Hale closed his eyes, physically sickened. "I'm going to make sure the DA buries you. You're looking at a felony charge, Reggie. That's prison time. Let's see how articulate you are when you're locked in a concrete box for years." The recording ended with the deafening thud of Whitaker slamming Reginald's head into the doorframe of the cruiser. Agent Langford disconnected the tablet and handed it to one of his agents. "Agent, go to Interrogation Room A. Place Shane Whitaker under federal arrest for deprivation of rights under color of law, 18 U.S.C. Section 242. Read him his Miranda rights. If he speaks, document it. If he resists, you have my full authorization to use force." Two FBI agents drew their handcuffs and marched down the hallway. Seconds later, the muffled sound of Whitaker shouting in panic echoed from the back rooms. "I'm a cop! You can't do this! Chief, help me!" The shouts were abruptly cut off by the heavy thud of a body being slammed against a wall, followed by the distinctive metallic click-click of federal handcuffs locking into place. Reginald Forsythe adjusted his ruined suit jacket. He looked at Chief Hale, who looked like a man standing on the gallows, watching the lever being pulled. "Chief Hale," Reginald said, voice devoid of anger, replaced only by cold, clinical certainty, "you run a department where an officer felt entirely comfortable turning off his camera, fabricating multiple felony charges, and assaulting a compliant citizen in the street, simply because he believed his badge granted him absolute immunity. Tomorrow morning, I am calling the Attorney General. The Oakmont Hills Police Department is going to be placed under a federal consent decree. Every arrest Officer Whitaker has made in recent years will be audited, and you will be answering to a federal grand jury regarding your department's training and oversight." Reginald turned to Agent Langford. "Victor, I am going home now." "I have an agent outside with your keys, Reginald," Langford said softly. "He will drive your car to your house. You ride with me." As Reginald walked out of the precinct, the red and blue lights of the FBI vehicles reflecting off the wet pavement, he did not look back. Inside, Shane Whitaker was being dragged out in chains, finally experiencing the terrifying, inescapable weight of the justice system he had so eagerly weaponized against others. The fallout was catastrophic, immediate, and heavily publicized. By sunrise, the story had broken. Major news networks ran the headline on a continuous loop. "Racist suburban cop arrests black federal judge. FBI takes over precinct." The dashcam audio leaked inevitably to the press, played on every radio station and morning show in the country. The public outrage was a tidal wave. Mayor Leland Bennett of Oakmont Hills held an emergency press conference the following afternoon, visibly sweating under the harsh camera lights. He announced the immediate forced resignation of Chief Preston Hale and welcomed the Department of Justice's civil rights investigation with open arms and full transparency. It was a desperate attempt to save the city from the inevitable multi-million-dollar lawsuits already piling up. Several months later, inside the soaring mahogany-paneled walls of the United States District Courthouse, the very building where Reginald Forsythe reigned supreme, Shane Whitaker's trial was swift and brutal. Stripped of his badge, his union backing, and his unearned swagger, Whitaker sat at the defense table looking small, pale, and terrified. His high-priced defense attorney had attempted every trick in the book, claiming the audio was taken out of context, claiming Whitaker felt threatened, begging for a plea deal. The federal prosecutors declined everything. They wanted blood. Reginald Forsythe did not preside over the case, of course. He was the star witness. When he took the stand, the courtroom fell into an absolute breathless hush. He wore a pristine charcoal gray suit, his silver hair perfectly trimmed, his posture immaculately straight. He recounted the events of that rainy night with clinical precision. He did not embellish. He did not need to. The raw, unfiltered truth of the dashcam audio, paired with the quiet dignity of his testimony, painted a devastating picture. Judge Forsythe, the federal prosecutor, asked during direct examination, "When the officer threatened to lock you in a concrete box for years, did you fear for your life?" Reginald looked across the courtroom, locking eyes with Whitaker. Whitaker could not hold his gaze. He stared down at his shackled hands. "I did not fear for my life, counselor," Reginald replied, his deep voice carrying easily to the gallery. "I knew who I was, and I knew the immense power of the office I hold would ultimately protect me. But what terrified me, what breaks my heart even today, is the absolute certainty that if I had been a 22-year-old college student or a father driving home from a late shift at a factory, I would currently be in state prison. The defendant's actions were not an aberration. They were a routine." The jury deliberated briefly. When the verdict was read, Shane Whitaker stood on shaking legs. "On the charge of deprivation of rights under color of law, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of obstruction of justice, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of aggravated assault by a peace officer, we find the defendant guilty." Presiding Judge Cornelius Thornton, a man known for his merciless sentencing, looked down at Whitaker with open disgust. "Mr. Whitaker," Judge Thornton boomed, "you were entrusted with a badge and a gun to protect the public. Instead, you used them as tools of terror, motivated by nothing more than your own vile prejudice and a grotesque abuse of authority. You picked the wrong man on the wrong night, and in doing so, you exposed a rot that this court will not tolerate." He banged his gavel. "I sentence you to a lengthy term in a maximum security federal penitentiary, to be followed by 10 years of supervised release. You are remanded immediately to the custody of the United States Marshals." A choked sob escaped Whitaker's throat as the marshals grabbed his arms, roughly pulling his hands behind his back to apply the heavy steel chains. Click, click. The sound echoed in the courtroom, a poetic, devastating mirror to the cuffs he had slapped onto Reginald Forsythe's wrists months earlier. Reginald watched from the back row of the gallery as Whitaker was led away through the side door, his career, his freedom, and his reputation completely destroyed by his own arrogance. Reginald stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. He walked out of the courtroom, passing through the heavy oak doors and stepping out into the bright, clear afternoon sunlight. He descended the wide marble steps of the courthouse, acknowledging the respectful nods of federal marshals and passing attorneys. He climbed into his repaired, perfectly clean Lexus LS. As he started the engine, he looked at his wrists. The bruises had long since faded, but the memory of the cold steel remained. Justice had been served today. One bad cop had been removed from the streets. But Reginald knew the truth of his profession. Tomorrow the sun would rise, and there would be more work to do. He shifted the car into drive, pulling smoothly into the flow of traffic, ready to return to the bench and continue the fight. Power, arrogance, and prejudice are a dangerous combination. But as this story proves, nobody is above the law, especially when they cross the very man who enforces it. Officer Whitaker thought his badge gave him the right to ruin a man's life, but justice served him a heavy dose of his own medicine. True authority does not come from a gun or a badge, it comes from integrity. It comes from... If this story of ultimate karma and justice had you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more incredible real-life stories where the truth fights back. Leave a comment below. What would you have done in Judge Forsythe's shoes? See you in the next one.